Hey guys, and welcome back to another brand new YouTube video. And in this video, we're gonna learn how to program a contact management system using Python. So basically, we're going to work with sqlite3, which is like a database which is a database here. So we're gonna build this project whereby you can create a lot of contacts. Let's say at times when you have contacts on your phone, as you should have, and let's say you want to try and keep them in a database for you, or you want to store them in a software whereby it just manages all your contacts for you. So we're going to learn how to do that, where you can create new contacts with, let's say, your first name, your last name, and even the what they call it, and with the phone number. So that's what we're going to do in this video. So let me show you guys the preview on how we're going to go about doing that. Yeah, so here this is the preview. So here we have our row ID, our first name, our last name, and the phone number. So basically here you can just create a new record. So let's say I want to give a name, which is, let's say, Daniel David. So Daniel is going to be the first name, and for the last name, let me give it David. And for the phone number, let me give you 090, any number there. Let's do create. So here you can see that at row ID 4, you can see that it has created a new object for us, and there it's Daniel David. So I can decide to create another one, or to, let me say, update one. So I'm going to update row ID 4, and this time, let's say I want to change the name from, okay, let me say I'm going to change the last name. So I'm going to change it to, let's say, Kingsley. Let's go there and let's update. And here you can see that it has changed the name to Kingsley. And let's say we want to delete row ID 3. Let me go ahead and delete row ID 3. Row ID 3 is YouTube, so I can go to 3 and delete. So you can see that it all works perfectly fine there, and it has successfully deleted it. You can update, you can create, and other stuff like that. So let me just give you guys a preview of the main.py. So we're going to deal with the database file, where we're going to handle all our database there. And we're also going to have our GUI, where it's just basically going to handle the graphical user interface. So if you like this, please show me some support by liking, sharing, and subscribing. And please stick around, and let's get right into it. Yeah, so to get started with the project, basically we are going to have two files. The first one is going to be the main.py. Let me just go ahead and create that file for us. So this file is going to handle everything about the database, like adding a new record, updating a record, deleting a record, and other things, creating a table, other things like that. Everything that deals with the database, that is what this file is going to handle. And we're also going to create another file, which is going to handle the GUI, which is for the graphical user interface for the display. But for now, let's just stick around to the main.py, which is for the database. And later on in the video, we'll cover up the graphical user interface. So the first thing we're going to have to import is sqlite3. So this sqlite3 is basically SQL. So I'm going to create a function which is going to be the find create table. So the find create table, and what I want this function to do is to basically create the table for us. Like, this function is going to create the connection to the database, or maybe if the database was not created, it's going to go ahead and create a database file. So this one is just going to handle the creation of the table with and defining all the columns that we want. So the first I'm going to do is I'm going to say con should be equal to sqlite3 dot connect, and here I have to pass in the name of my database file. But I don't have a database file, so I'm just going to give it a name. So let me just name it sqlite class.zb. That's what the name I'm going to give it. And if it doesn't find this database in our directory, it's going to go ahead and create a new one. But if it finds the sqlite class.zb in our directory, or in a folder, it's going to go ahead and continue using that database. But since we don't have it now, if we run it, it's going to go ahead and create the file for us. So now that I've created that connection, or created the database, now we have to create a cursor object. So I'm going to do con.cursor, and that is going to create a cursor for us where we can now execute commands into our database or into our table. So the first thing I'm going to do is to create a table. So I'm going to do c.execute, and this c is basically our con.cursor. And here I want to execute a command. And basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to do three this quotes there. So the first, what I'm going to type is I'm going to say create table. So I'm going to create a table. And here I'm going to give the name of the table. So I'm going to name it, let's say, contacts. So contacts, and contacts, I need to pass in the columns that I want to define. So every table or in a database has a column. And let me just say something. The database is actually very useless without a table. So a table is the one that consists of the rows and columns, and the database is just like an empty file there. So without the table, the database is kind of like useless. And to create a table, you have to have rows and columns. So now let us define the columns for every row, or the columns that every record is going to consist of. So in this in contact, we have to create a bracket there, and here we're basically going to pass in first text. So first is going to be the name of the column, or we can pass in first name if you want like this. But I'm just going to go ahead with first so that everything to be just shorter for us. And the last one, or the second one, is going to be last. And this text is actually the data type. So data type. And this one I'm going to pass in phone number, or I think let me just go with number. So number, I'll put text. But now that you guys will be thinking, okay, number not supposed to be an integer. Yeah, if you do this, it's going to work perfectly fine. But if you know that some numbers start with +1, I think that's for America, plus 91, that is for India. Like in Nigeria, it is +234, and other things like that. Or you can start 090, blah blah blah. But if you actually see here, I can see that this place is red because most numbers can't start with plus or can't start with 0 something. So that means that what we have to do is to make it as a text so that it will be able to allow the number start from 0, or the number start from a plus or something like that. So that's why we're going to go ahead and add text to all of them there. But if not, you can just put integer. If you're actually working on another project and anything has to be an integer, you can do that. So, but I'm going to stick around to text to avoid any issues for us. So now let me just move this to the other line. So after doing that, it has created it successfully, but now it's not actually going to save that to the database. So we have to let it know that, okay, we made some changes to the database and we want you to apply all those changes. So we're going to do con.commit. So con is going to commit the changes and it's going to save it in our database. So like this. And after doing this, what you have to do is now to close that connection. So I'm going to do con.close. So after you commit it, always remember to close the connection. So that there has basically created our table. And okay, let me just make some changes here so that in case of anything. So this will work perfectly fine. But what if by mistakenly you run the code again? It's gonna give us an issue, because number one is that here we're always creating the table contact. So what if we have actually created the table contact before, and we don't want it to go ahead and create the table contact again so that we don't have any issues in our database? So what we're going to do is we're going to make some conditions that if the table has been created before, don't create it. So to do that, here we're going to say create table, and here we're basically going to do if not exist. So here we're saying that creates the table. Okay, there's supposed to be a space there. So here we're saying creates the table if contact does not exist. So creates table if not exist contact. So that is going to create the table if it doesn't exist. But if it exists or it has been created before, it's not going to bother creating it again. So I think that is going to be everything for our define create table. And now let me just go ahead and run the code, run this function so that you guys will be able to see to create a database file for us. So if you look at this left hand side here, I'm going to try and run that, and you see that it's going to create a file for us there. So come here. So can you see here that I created sqlite class.db, so it has automatically created or successfully created our file there. So let me just close that there. Close the terminal. And let's go here. Wait, terminal not closing. Okay. So after this, I'm going to define another function for us. So obviously this function is basically going to be the one to add a record. So here we have been able to create our table successfully, but now we want to find a way to add a record. So basically I'm going to do define add one. So I'm going to define this function, and this one is basically just going to add a record for us. So this one is going to take a parameter, the first, last, and obviously the number. So if you notice, these are the parameters that we're going to need to create all this, to create a record, because to create a record, we have to specify 3 columns. And the first one is the first name, the last name, and the number. So we're just basically passing 3 parameters there that represents them. So now what I'm going to do is always remember that you always have to create a connection to the database. So I'm going to create that connection to the database now. So it's going to be con should be equal to sqlite3. Am I typing sqlite3 dot connect? So here you have to connect, and here I'm basically going to connect to sqlite class dot db. So sqlite class dot db. Let me just go ahead and copy this in case I made any issue. So I guess everything was correct there. So this is gonna go ahead and create the connection, and now we have to create a cursor. So I'm gonna grab that from up there. I'm gonna paste it here. So this is now going to create a cursor object in our database, in our connection, whereby we will now be able to make execute commands in there. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to say c.execute. So this is how you can execute a command. So here I want to execute something, and what I want to execute, I want to execute insert into contact. So contact is the name of our table. I think that is what we specify here. Yeah, contact here. So we want to insert into the table contact, and here we have to specify the values we want to pass in. So here I'm going to pass in a question mark. Just hold on, I'm going to explain why I'm doing this. And here I'm going to pass in a comma, and here now we're going to say that, okay, I want this first to represent this first comma there. If you notice there, okay, sorry, I was supposed to do this, not there, not like that. Okay, yeah. So this first is going to represent the first comma and the first question mark, and as well the last is going to present the second question mark, and obviously the number is going to present this third question mark. So basically what I did there was just to prevent any vulnerability, any issues in our code, because at times hackers can actually get to see what data we're passing directly to our database in lifetime. So to prevent that from happening and them hacking into our database, what we can do is to pass in these question marks, which is basically going to stop them from seeing the data being passed. So what they'll see, I think, is just the question marks like this. But in the code, we're actually passing this first, last number. So these 3 question marks are going to represent these 3 parameters here where we're passing in our function. So that's going to go ahead and do everything well for us. So now this worked perfectly fine for us. And let me just create another function, which is basically going to show all the records in our database. So, okay, before I do that, always remember to commit your changes so that you tell the database, okay, I made some changes. And let me just do con.close to close the connection. So always try to remember that. At times I also forget. So just try and remember that too. So now let's just define another function, which is basically just going to display everything in our database for us, all the records. So I'm gonna define show. And show is basically, I'm just gonna copy this here. I'm gonna grab that there and paste that there. So create our connection and create a cursor too. So after that, what I'm going to do is c.execute. So I want to execute a command. And what I want to execute is select asterisk from. So I want to select everything from our database. So I'm going to select asterisk from contact, which is from our table contact. And when I select everything from our table contact, now we have executed that command, but now we want to show it out. So we want to store the results in a variable. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say result basically be equal to what's the result? Okay, the result should be equal to c.fetch_all. So c.fetch_all is going to print out, going to fetch everything out from our database. So remember that before you do c.fetch_all, you have to select everything. Asterisk means everything from our contact. Yeah. So okay, I think I should okay, so this is going to select everything from our contact, but basically we want to add another thing there, because if you are going to select everything from there, we also want to select the row ID. So the row ID is basically the primary key, so it automatically adds that for you. So let's say when you have your database and you create a new object, number one, let's say row ID number one is going to be for this, number two is going to be for this, like that. So every record is going to have a specific row ID, which is a primary key, which is a way of accessing that row or that record for us. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to select row ID so that you guys will be able to see that, okay, this is the first record, this is the second record, this is the third record, and stuff like that. So that's why I'm doing that there. And now what I'm going to do is, let me just return result. So that we return result, and that's there. So now let me just print show. Let me call the function show. Okay, so again, what did I do again? Okay, so always remember that you have to commit your changes there. So I don't know why I'm always forgetting that. So on.commit, and as the last one, you have to close your connection. Sorry guys that I'm also always forgetting that. So after closing your connection, we just want to return our result. And let me print show now, and you see that if we run that, it's going to be empty. So you can see this blank list there. So it's actually empty. But now let us add something to our database. So now let me call this add one function there, and let me pass in something. So the first thing, let me just pass in my name, Branson, and for the other one, let me just pass in my last name, which is, or my surname, which is OKK. And for my number, I'm going to pass something related, almost like my number, but not my number. Just put it 012, blah, blah, blah. What am I doing? I just passing something as my number there. And yeah. So after that, let me run that in. If we run that, it's going to as well show everything. So let me run that again. Comment this out again and run that again. So you can see that the list has something in it now. So you can see row ID 1, Branson, blah, blah, blah. And let me just create another one. So here I'm just going to do tkknter, which is basically my cyber name. So I'm going to do tkknter. And for my number, I'm just going to pass in another number. What am I doing? Let's say this is tkknter's number. Let me go ahead and run that there. And now you can see that row ID 1 is Branson OKK, as we saw before, and row ID 2 is tkknter, blah, blah, blah. But now let me try running this again, which is going to run this tkknter again and add that to our database. So let me run that now. And if you see now, it created the object again, tkknter here and tkknter here again with the same values. So if we actually change that and make another number, everything's going to work. But what if the user mistakenly set those values 2 times or 3 times or 5 times or 10 times, and maybe he's just trying to test out the program, or mistakenly he sends that multiple times? So to fix that issue there, that means that it is actually adding that. So that means that if we actually send that 100 times, it's going to go ahead and create 100 copies of it, and we don't want that to happen. Basically what we want is that whenever he adds one, we don't want to repeat that the same thing again. So what we're going to do now is we're going to make a condition to check if it found any record in our database or in our table which has the same parameters as the one that we want to create before, they don't create it. But if it doesn't find anyone, that means that it is we don't have any record like that with the same name, with the same last name, with the same number. If it doesn't find anyone like that, that means that okay, that means that it has never been created before, so we are good. Now that means that we can now create the record. So let me just create that condition there. So here I'm going to do, let me just give some spaces there. So here I'm going to run I'm going to execute a command, and here let me just use my f string. So here what I basically want to do is I want to select everything from our contact. Our contact is basically the name of our table. So I want to select everything from the contact where our first name is equal to. So I want to select everything from our contact where our first name is equal to first, which is basically this parameter here that we pass in here. So where the first name is equal to first, and here I'm going to do and where our last name in our record, and this last basically I'm just using this from our column where we created in our table. So the columns first, last, and number. So I want to check where the column, where any record last name is equal to the last name that we passed in here. So that's what I'm going to check there. And I'm going to put another and here it's going to be where number is equal to equal to the number that we pass in our function. So please remember to add this single quotes here, because it's actually supposed to expect something like let's say Branson like this, and it has to be in a quote. But since we're using this our formatting this thing, so we can just easily pass in first like that. But remember to add the single quote outside the parentheses there, or the outside the curly braces. So it's going to check. Let me just explain what I did here. So I'm using f strings, which is just to format, which is going to help us do this here. So we're selecting everything asterisk from our contact where our first name is equal to the first name that we passed in our function, and as well the last name is equal to the last name that we passed in our function, and the number is equal to the number that we passed in our function. So those are the things that we want to check there. So now, so if you check that, I want to store that in a variable result. I'm going to store that in a variable result. So I'm going to do result. So result should basically be equal to c.fetch all. And as you can see, this is what we did in our show function here. This is our function here. Or let me just name this show all. So that's what we did there. And when it fetches everything, what I want to do is I want to create a condition that if the length of the result is 0, that means that if it's 0, that means it did not find any result that matches that query that we pass in there. So that means that it is empty, and we are good to go to create a record with those names or those parameters passed. So we're going to do if the length of the result, which is basically this result here, is equal to equal to 0, that means that it is empty and you did not find any matching values like that. So that means that we're good to go to create our new object or our new record. So I'm just going to do this like this, so that if it's 0, we can do that. But now there's actually another catch here. So what if in our GUI web, or that is what we're going to do later in the video, we have a button which is to submit, to add a record. And what if the user just clicks that thing multiple times, and it did not pass in any values there? So that means that it's just clicking the button like that, and it's basically going to be blank, and it's going to go ahead and create multiple records with blank names. So that would be an issue. So now we have to create we have to try and create some conditions that if nothing is passed in there, so if something is actually passed in the first name, the last name, and the number, we want it to go ahead and run this. But if anyone is blank, I don't want it to run that. So here let's just do and So here we as well want to make sure that first name, the first, is not equal to blank. So if it's not blank, and as well the last is not blank, is not blank. And here I also want to do and number is not blank. So that is what I want to check. I want to make sure that none of them are blank. So if some, they must have something in them and the result must be equal to 0. So it must not find any matching result there. So that is what we just did here. And now let me try running this thing here again. So I have to change that to show all since we changed the name here. So now let's just try running this again. So remember that we had tagging this 2 times here in our result. So let me try running that like multiple times, like 5 or 15 times. So it's still working, running. And if you go here, you can see that we only have these 2 ones. This tagging this and tagging that. And those are the two, that is the 2 times that we created before. And as you can see, it did not add it again. So that means that everything is working perfectly fine. So if somebody is trying to spam our database, he or she will not be able to do that because it will detect that, okay, this thing has been created before and it's not going to go ahead and create another object of it since it has already been stored in our database. So now everything is working fine there. So now I believe that you guys will be guessing, okay, if we do that, we surely want to have to delete our data to delete some records. At times we might want to delete our contacts or something like that. So now we're going to do the delete function. Let's go ahead and create a delete function here. So here I'm going to define, let's say, delete. And here is where this ID, row ID, comes in play. So if you go here in our function, in our results here in the terminal, you can see that it has row IDs. So here the Branson is row ID 1, tagging this is row ID 2, and the other tagging is row ID 3. So those row ID are the primary key, which every record can have the same primary key. So that primary key is a unique value which is used to access a specific record in our database. So now we want to delete our records based on our primary key, based on that unique key there. So delete is going to take parameter ID, or let's say row ID. Let me just leave it as ID there. I think that should just be the best name. So ID there. And now I want to do my con. Remember, we always have to make that connection to our database. And we'll always have to close our database. So let me just copy that here. We'll have to, after doing that, we have to make changes to our database and close the database. So that is what we have to do there. And now it's only one line of code that we have to do to delete it. So now we have to run a command. We have to execute a command. And what do we want to execute? We want to execute delete from, contact, which is the name of our table, where, so I want to delete from the contact where our row ID, or where any row ID in the record is equal to the row ID we're passing here. So that's what we want to do. We want to delete where row ID is equal to the row ID that we're passing here. That is going to go ahead and delete that for us there. And now I'm going to go ahead, make changes to our database and close it. So now, instead of doing this, let me just comment this out. So I'll show you guys what's going to happen. And now let me do delete. And here I want to delete row ID 3. Let me just open up my terminal to show you guys which one is row ID 3. So if you see row ID 3 is this other repeated tagging there. So I'm going to go ahead and delete that there. So now let me just pass in 3. Let's run that there. So as you can see, it has been deleted. So now it's only row ID 1 and row ID 2. So you can see that it worked perfectly fine for us. So we did not have any issues there. It successfully deleted that row ID 3, and you can see how it actually works. So you can delete any record in our database using their row IDs there. So after that, everything it's working perfectly fine for us. So now let's go ahead in creating a function which is basically just going to update a record. So let's say your contact change their name, or let's say change their phone number, and you want to go ahead and update that phone number. So how can you update that phone number? So that's what we're going to learn. We're going to do now. So I'm going to go ahead in creating a function now. I'm going to do some spaces there, and now let's do define update. So this update is basically going to update, and here I'm going to say ID first. So these are going to be the parameters it's going to take. So to update it, you have to use its row ID to update it. And this first last email is going to be the new parameters, the first, the last, and the number. Let me just add that there. So this here are going to be the parameters you're going to pass in to update their corresponding first name, their last name, and their number. So to update it, the first thing you're going to have to do is to get their ID. So that's what we're going to do now. And now what we're going to do is basically get all these our compulsory things that we need there, which is the connection to our database. And the other one is to commit our changes and to as well close our connection. So those are the things that we need now. And now let's get right into the coding part. So now let's just do okay, let me just explain what we're going to do now before I just start coding. Yeah. So what we're going to do is we want to check that if, let's say, this is just a very small algorithm that we're going to need. So there are different ways of doing this, but I find this like the best way for me as of now to actually do this so that it will not affect our graphical user interface. So basically what I want to do now, don't worry about what I just said. So what I'm going to do is we're going to create a condition to check that if first is not empty. So that means that if first actually has something in it, what I want to do is I want to change it. So that means that if we actually type in something in first, it's going to go ahead and change it to change whatever it has been before to whatever we typed in there. But if we leave first closed, that means that we did not make any changes to first, but rather we made some changes to number. So number is not blank. That means it's going to go ahead and change number. So let's say we left two of them, first and number, empty, and we only made changes to last. We typed in something for last, and it's going to go ahead and change the last name to the last that we passed in there. And let's say you passed in first and last, but you left number empty. It's going to go ahead and change first and last. So that's just the basic thing we're going to do now. So I'm going to do if first is not equal to blank. So if it's not blank, let's use this double quotes there. So if it's not blank, what I want to do is I want to say c.execute. So I want to execute a command, and what I want to do is I want to say I want to use my f string, and I basically want to update contact, which is the name of our table, and I want to update contact, and here I want to set. So I want to set first this first in our column. Let me just scroll up to show you guys what I'm talking about. And here you can see first there. So I want to update first. I want to set that first to be equal to you have to add your what they call these quotation marks there. So I'm going to set first to be equal to first here, the first that we pass in there. And here I'm going to set it to be equal to first where. So here we're making that condition that where do we want to set it? Which record do we want to change? So I want to change it to where the row ID is equal to the ID that we passed in. So this ID is basically the row ID that I was talking about, which is the primary key, and which is basically what we use for our deletes here. So we want to change the first name to whatever we pass in our function, where the row ID is equal to this row ID. So that is basically for the first. And let me just go ahead and copy this, just not to waste so much time on this. I'm going to go ahead and copy this here. So let me just do this here. So let me just give some spaces there, some gaps. So now this one, I'm going to change it to last. And this one is going to be our number. So this one is going to be number. And for the last, I'm going to update contacts. And here I want to set our last name, which is last, to be equal to last. That is the thing we want to do there. And for this, I want to set number to be equal to number, where row ID is equal to the row ID that we pass in there. I think that's it. Should work perfectly fine now. And let's just go ahead and test that out so I'll be able to see what's happening. So here, let me just call the update, Control C. So let me just run the code. So I'm gonna paste updates here, and let's do updates. So I want to change row ID 1, which is Branson OKK. So I want to change it to brand text, which is the name of my YouTube channel. So I'm gonna put brand and text. I just typed in there. So brand text. And I think that this is gonna give us an issue. Let me just run that. For me, it's gonna give, yeah. So you can see, give us an issue, and it says missing one required positional argument. So you know that here we pass in our row ID, our first name, our last name. But if we see our function requires 4 arguments, well, we only pass in 3. So we did not pass in number. So at times, let's say, you know that in our function, what if we don't want to change the number? So we're just going to leave number blank as it is. So to fix that, let's just add to be equal to something. So that means that anytime we call it, it's always going to be equal to that. So like that. So that means that if we don't call number, it's automatically going to set number to be equal to 0. It's going to set number to be blank, which means that it's not going to execute number like that. So now let's just try running that again. And for me, I think it's going to change that to brand text. Yeah, let me just make that bigger. So here you can see that it worked perfectly fine. Before it was Branson OKK, and now it is now brand text here. So you can see that everything worked perfectly fine there. So yeah, so you can see that it changed Branson OKK to brand text. So I believe that this is what we're going to need for our what they call it, for our projects, which is only for the backend, for the database part. So I believe that you guys understand everything. And sorry that I'm not going to be explaining everything like very in details, because like this is not actually just, I'm not teaching it from scratch here. So I'm just teaching you guys what you're gonna need to build the project. So if you want me to do SQLite, you can ask me, leave it down in the comment section, and I'll do a video on SQLite3 for beginners. Yeah, so I think this is everything for our main.py file, and now let's jump right into our GUI file, where we're gonna learn how to do the GUI, the graphical user interface, and make everything work perfectly fine. So let me go ahead and create the GUI file here. I'm going to say GUI.py. So now here we're in our GUI.py, and now let's just start programming our GUI.py file. So the first thing we're going to have to do is I'm going to import this main.py. So I'm going to try and import this our database file here. So here I'm going to do import main, which is the name of my file. So now we're going to import tkinter, since we're going to be using tkinter for our GUI. Tkinter is a library used for making GUIs in Python, and it comes with Python itself. So I'm going to say from tkinter, I want to import asterisk, which is going to import everything from tkinter. And as well, we're going to look from tkinter, I want to import ttk, and this one allows you to use extra things in tkinter. Yeah. So I'm going to import main. Main is for this our database file here that we created, and tkinter is just for creating GUIs, and here we're importing tkinter, ttk there. So I believe that that should be everything that we're going to create, we're going to need. So now let's do root. Root is going to be equal to tk, and basically this is going to create a window for us, like a window, like a just like this our Visual Studio Code we're using to code here. It's going to create a window for us there, and at the end I'm going to do root.main loop. And root.main loop is basically going to refresh the GUI frequently, which is going to allow us to make changes. And if let's say whenever we click a button and it has to do something, it's automatically going to like refresh the window, like it's just going to make it appear on the screen. So let me just run that, and you see a small window popping up. So sorry about that, let me run that again. Let's see what's going to happen. So you can see this small window popping up here, right? So this is our tk window. So you can see that it has tk, and this root is basically creating the window, and this root.main loop is basically allowing it to stay on the GUI there. So it's actually printing out this brand text things there. So let me just go ahead and close that. So I'm going to delete this print statement here. So let me just remove that there. So basically, let me just leave the create table there. So I'm going to remove everything there, and here, let's just start from afresh. So you can see that that window was very small. So let's just make some changes to that window. So let's just make it a bit bigger. So I'm going to give it a geometry, like a size of, let's say, 790 by 720, I guess. I think this should be okay. Let me just run that and show you guys. So this is going to change the size of the window. Okay, so we have an issue here. Okay, the X supposed to be in small letter, lowercase. Let's run that and see. Okay, so this is the size that I want the window to be like. Not like this. So this is the size that I want it to be like. So that's why I made it this size. And now let me just go ahead and close it there. So after that, the first thing we're going to have to do is I want to create a variable, and not a variable. I want to create a frame. So basically, this frame is going to be like a small window inside that window. I'm sorry if I might not be able to explain this very well, but just try to understand that, let's say a frame, you have your complete window like this. So a frame is actually like a small portion of that window. So that means that we want to make specific changes to that specific part of the window. So that means that well, let's say we're going to divide our window into three parts. The first part, we're going to make it as a frame, whereby we can treat it exactly as we treat our main window. So just like treating the whole window, we can actually just create labels, create buttons inside that small frame. So just like creating a sub window inside a bigger window, something like that. So just please try and understand, or well, you're going to understand as we move on later in our video or in the code. So I'm going to create frame one. So frame one should basically be equal to frame. So this frame, we are going to pass in root. So frame is going to create that sub window, a smaller version of the window, whereby we can make changes to it and treat it like a window where we can create buttons inside that small portion of it. So yeah, so frame is going to be based on root. So we want it to be inside this root window, inside our window. And here I'm going to do frame one. So frame one dot place. So I want to place it as a position, and I'm just going to use x and y coordinates, horizontal and vertical, to do that. So I'm going to say x should be equal to 40 and y should be equal to 10. So this is just basically the vertical, the horizontal and the vertical. So this is just the positioning in the screen. So that is how I just want it to be like. And let me just copy that. So basically I'm just going to do 2 frames. I think that's just what I'm going to need. So I'm going to do frame 2 should be equal to frame root. And this time, this other one, x is going to be equal to 10. And y is going to be equal to 10 there. So after that, now, I want to try and create a table. So a table basically means, or like a table, let's say you're going to have your column. So this column, the first column is going to be the row ID. The second column is going to be for the first name. The third column for the last name. The fourth column for the phone number, all those kind of things. So I want to tabulize my data. So I'm going to use something which we're going to use from our tkinter, from this ttk. So I'm going to do triv. Triv is just going to stand for like a tree view. Yeah. So triv is going to be equal to ttk, which is this thing we imported from tkinter here. So ttk dot tree view. So let me just write tree view there. And we're going to import that from tree view. And I want it to be based, I want it to be inside frame one. So frame one there. So frame one there. So it's going to be inside frame one, and which is basically just this frame one there. So it's going to be inside frame one there. And let me just give it a height, I believe. So let me just give it a height. So I want the height to be equal to 25. So it's going to be inside that frame one, and it's going to have a height of 25. So don't worry, guys. I'm still going to run the code to show you guys the changes there. But for now, I don't think you're able to see any. Let me just run that. I don't think you'll be able to see anything. So it's just going to be like blank as it is normally. but you're not going to see anything now. But as we go on in code, you're able to see the differences there. Now, what I want to do is I want to create a vertical scroll bar whereby we can like move down and up. So let's say at times, you know, that if we have too much things in our program, we can actually move, we can use the scroll bar to scroll from the up to the down, like all those kind of things like that. So here I'm basically gonna do, scroll bar. So scroll bar, I'm gonna do like this. So vertical scroll bar, this is just gonna stand for vertical scroll bar. And vertical scroll bar is gonna be equal to ttk dot scroll bar. Yeah. So scroll bar is gonna be inside that our frame 2. So remember that we created a frame 1, which is x is equal to 40 and y is equal to 10, and frame 2 is basically, it's supposed to be frame 2. Yeah. So and frame 2 is x is equal to 10 and y is equal to 10. So those are the coordinates it is in. So inside frame 2, I want scroll bar to be based on frame 2, and I want the orientation. Orientation does mean like whether it's going to be vertical or you know, horizontal. So I'm going to make it vertical. Or let me just make, yeah, you know, let me just do like this. Vertical. So I want it to be vertical, and I basically want it to have a command. So the command will basically be triv.yview. So I know that this might be kind of confusing, but just try to understand that we're basically making it inside frame 2, and we're making the orientation to be vertical. So we want it to go from up to down, vertical, and we're also making the command should be triv.yview. So this is just like an inbuilt command for vertical. Y is for vertical, x is for horizontal. So for vertical view. So these are just the things you just have to add to make your vertical scroll bar work. So just try to understand that there. So after that, what I want to do is I want to pack it to the screen. So here we have created it, but there's something when it comes to tkinter. I don't know about any other library or framework, but when it comes to tkinter, you create it, but you don't yet put it on the screen. So you have created it, but it's not yet on the screen. So now to pack it or to place it inside the screen, we have to use .pack. So it's just like here, we created our frame 1 here, but here we did frame 1.place. So here we're not placing it to the screen. And here we're just taking scroll bar .pack. .pack just means that it's going to place it directly. Place means that it's going to pack it, like you're going to place it on the screen, but with some coordinates. But this one is just automatically just going to put it there to make it take over the whole screen. And it's not actually going to take all over the whole screen, but it's going to take all over the whole frame 2. And remember that it's going to treat a frame as a sub window. Like it's going to take over the whole frame 2 there. So that's what we just want that to happen there. And I think after that, okay, I forgot to do this. Sorry. So remember that we are supposed to place it here. So we haven't created it yet. We have created it, but it's not yet on the screen. So here we have to place it on the screen. So here I'm just going to do triv.pack. That will just automatically place it to the screen for us. And now that I've been able to create the tree view and create the scroll bar, now what I want to do is I want to define the headings for the columns. So remember that we're going to have 4 headings. The first one is going to be the row ID. Let me just type it here. Row ID. The other one I think is going to be the first, the last, and the number. So these are going to be the 4 row IDs there that we're going to need. So basically now what I want to, let me just comment this out so that we're able to know what we're going to do. So now here I'm going to do triv. So I'm basically calling this tree view here. And here we're going to specify the columns that we want. So here I'm going to do columns. So columns, and this one is going to be equal to a tuple of 1, it's 2. Let me just continue with our double quotes there. 2, 3, and 4. So this is what we need there. 1, 2, 3, 4. So those are going to be the number of columns we're going to have. And now here are the, let me just make a comment there so that we'll know. Let's say defining number of columns. So here we are defining the number of columns there. And now let me just do this. So now let's do another one whereby now here we're going to show the headings. So let me just, should I say defining? Okay, let me just defining the headings. So here we're defining the headings, and here I'm gonna do triv. Sorry, triv show. So this is basically going to allow us to show our headings. So if not, it's not going to work, but this is going to allow us to actually display the headings for us. So this time now we're going to assign the width and the anchor to the respective columns. So I think let me just be writing the comments there, but I know that here it might be kind of tricky. So let me do assigning. So assigning the width and anchor, okay, and anchor to the respective columns. So here we're going to assign the width and the anchor to the respective column. So now let's assign the width and the anchor to these respective columns. So now let's just do triv.column. Triv.column. And which column are we talking about? We're talking about the first one. So if we go here, we said defining the number of columns, which is triv columns 1, 2, 3, and 4. So for the first one, what do we want to do? We want to do width. So here I want to give it a width, and I'm just gonna give it a width of 100. And for the other one, I'm gonna give it an anchor of center. I'm gonna give it an anchor of center. Let me go ahead and copy that and paste that there. So from here, I'm gonna give it 2, 3, and 4. So these are gonna be the width, and you know that for the row ID is basically just 1, 2, 3, all those base small numbers. But for the second one and for the other ones are going to be kind of long because of the. So you know that for the second one, which is basically going to be the first name, the last name, and the number, those ones are going to be long. So I'm going to move those ones to be 200, 200, 200. That's going to be the width for them. And after that, now we'll assign the width, the anchors, and the other ones. But now we have to assign the names. So now they don't have any name. So now we have to give them some names there. So just try to understand, it's very interesting. So here I'm just gonna do. So here I'm gonna do assigning, and here what I want to assign, I want to assign the heading. So now let me just do the assigning the heading names to the. So here I'm assigning the heading names to the respective columns, and here let me just do triv, and I'm gonna do triv.heading 1. So I think triv.heading 1. Okay, it's supposed to be 1 like this because of these are the ones that we here for the columns. So triv.heading 1, and here I want to do text. So I'm gonna give it a text, and this one I think I should just give it row ID. So row ID, and let me just go ahead and copy this for the 4. So I'm gonna do 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, no, like this. So this one's gonna be for the 2, for the second one, for the third one, and basically for the fourth one. And the name for this one is basically just gonna be first name. So first name, and the other one, let me just make this last name. So last name, and this one, let me just make it a phone number there. So this is what we can just do there. And after that, let me just try running that to see if we can see any changes. So as you can see, this is what we have been able to do for now, and you can see that this is how the GUI looks like, and I hope that you guys like the GUI. Well, so we have our row ID, so you can see that the width is smaller, a bit smaller there. So here you can see here that we specify the width should be 100. And let me just bring that up here. So here you can see that the row ID is 100 and the width is 100. The other one is a bit smaller and things like that. So you can see that for the first name is a bit bigger. there. For the first name is a bit bigger, for the last name is bigger too, and the phone number is also big compared to the row ID. Then here is our scroll bar. As you can see, this is our scroll bar there, and that is how we can actually just create the table now. So now let's just try adding values into it, and let's create buttons where and entry boxes where we can update, create new objects, and make it look more interactive and give it some functionalities to do. So I'm going to close that there, and so that we can start creating some functions now. So well, now the first function I'm going to create is the add one. So I know that you guys might be wondering, okay, why don't you actually just call this function here from the add one here. So basically we are going to use this add one function here, but when we're dealing with GUI, we're going to have to like twist around some things in the GUI. So we're actually going to use this function, and that one in the GUI part, we're as well just going to do some changes to the function and make everything work out perfectly fine. But we're going to make reference to all these functions here. So now here, where is itself? Okay, so here basically now I'm going to create a function, or I don't know if I should create the buttons first. Okay, I think let me just create the buttons first so that we're able to see what we're doing. So I think, okay, let me just create the labels first. I think that should just be better there. So I'm going to do ID. So I'm going to do ID label. So ID label should be equal to label. So this is how you can create a label in tkinter. And here I'm going to give it as root. And remember that root is the name of our window. So I want it to be in the window, not in the frames, all these frames here. So I want it to be in the window itself. I think let me just make this smaller there. So it should be in the window itself, and root is the window. And here I want to give it a text. So the label has to have a text. And here let me just give it I think the first, okay, let me just give it row ID. So row ID here, and the other one we're gonna do ID label. ID label dot place. So I want to place it based on x coordinates and y coordinates. So I want x should be 10, should be equal to 10, and I want the y should be equal to 550. And I want you to know that they start to count from the top. So let's say around here, this, if you look at my cursor here, let's say this here might be around x is equal to 1, x is equal to 1, y is equal to 1, and as it gradually reduces, it becomes, the y increases. So let's say if it's around here, let's say y might be actually like, I think maybe like 500 or 300 or something. As it reduces, it keeps on increasing. So this 550 is going to be a bit below. So I'm going to copy this like this. I'm going to copy that, and I'm going to paste that again. So for this time, okay, let me just create the label, the entry. So I will have an entry box there. So I'm going to give it an entry box. And this entry box here is not going to be label, but rather it's going to be entry. And here is going to be on root. But here, this time, it's not going to have a text because it's an entry where I just expected to input something inside. And here, I'm just going to give it a width. I think the width should be 10. I think that should just be okay, 10. And here, I'm just going to paste it at 70. So 70, I think it should just be as 550. So I think that is okay. Let me just run that to see how it looks like. So you can see here we have row ID, this and this. So this is how it looks like there. So you can see our entry, our row ID there. So that is how it looks like there. And I think, okay, wait, our entry was not showing. Okay, we haven't placed it on the screen yet. So let me try running that again. Let's see how it's going to look like. Let me run that again. And you'll be able to see okay, you can see the entry here, right? That entry box that we created there. So now let's go ahead in creating the other ones. So I think what I'm going to do, I'm going to copy everything from here. I'm going to give some spaces there. So for this, I'm going to give some spaces there so I won't get confused. So for this ID label, it's not going to be ID label, but let me just do this. But rather, it's going to be first label. For this one, I'm going to make it last label. And I think first, last. Okay. So this is what we're going to do there. And this one is going to be label. And the text for this one is basically just gonna be first name. So first name, and the other one is gonna be last name for this row ID. I think the last name. And for this one now, I'm going to change the x coordinates and all those kind of things there. So for this one, I want the x to be around, if 70 plus 7, that should be 140. So I think this is how it should be like. So I'm just repeating the values, the x coordinates. And for this other one, I'm going to make it at around, let's say 215. Okay, I think let me just make it around 218. So 218. So this one should still be 550, the y coordinates. And for this other x1, which is for the last name, I think that I'm gonna leave it as 335. 335, and this one is going to be 550 x. This one I think should be around 410. I guess that's how it should be. And I remember that we have to do for our phone number, so we have no dot for our phone number. So let me just do number. No, not in caps lock, number. So for this number, I'm gonna do the x should be around 540, 550. Let me just go ahead, 540, and the x should just have like 40, so that's gonna be 580. So this is gonna be 580, and I think that should work well. Hope I don't make any issues. Let me just any error. Let me go there and run. Okay, so you can see this is how it looks like. So this is how it looks like here. So you have our last name, our first name, our last name, our last this thing, and that is how it looks like. So you can see that here we have some issues whereby we, let me see if this is recorded. Okay, so you can see that there are some issues in the spacing there. So I'm gonna try and fix that right now. So there we have some issues, and how we can fix that, I think, is that let's remove all this width here. So this one shouldn't have width. I think it's only for the first one where we should just restrict the size there. And now let's try running that again. Let's see how it looks like. You can see it looks a bit better now. And I think that I think I'm gonna push what should I do here now to make it look better? Okay, so I think this last name, I need to like move it a bit to the right there. Okay, this last name, I think I should just name it number, phone number. Then let me just make it phone. So let's see how it's gonna look like. Phone there. So this one fits in well now. So this last name, I'm gonna try and push it to a bit to the right. So that's for the last name, and I think that is for. So I think this one should make it 340. I might be wrong there, but let me just try running that again, and let's see how it's gonna look like. So you can see that last name now fits in well, I guess so. Yeah. So last name fits in well now. So you can see you can now see last name well. So I'm gonna leave this as phone number because as phone, I don't want to move it as phone number. If not, it's going to be very long there. But I get that you guys get the idea. So that is how we can just make it look better there. And now we're done with the GUI, all those kind of parts there. And now I think that we should just create the buttons there so that we're able to see the buttons and add some designs to the button. So I think that I would like to create the buttons around here, where the buttons will be around here, and with different colors and stuff like that. So let me just check if it's still recording. Okay. So now let me go ahead and create some buttons. So here I'm going to do create. I think create button. So this is just variables there. Create button should not be equal to button. But what am I doing? So create button should be equal to button, and button should have a text of create under BG. BG just means for background color. So I want the background color. I think I should just make it like light. I think create should be green. So let me just make it light green. So that's it. Because in tkinter, I don't know why green is very dark, so it might not be that good. So I'm gonna leave that as that. And here, let me just do create button dot place. I want to place it on the screen, and I want x value should be 720. and y should be 550. So y should be 550 here, and I think let me just copy all this here so that we're able to, you know, copy that. And I'm going to change this one here to update. What am I doing? So this one is going to basically be update. Sorry about that. Don't know why this is not working. Okay, it's working now. So this is going to be update, and I'm going to update that there. And this one is basically going to be for delete. So we have different buttons for every different thing there. And here I'm going to change the text to update. So I'm going to change that the text update, and this I'm going to change the text to delete. So the text here should be delete. And the background color for this one, I'm just going to give a color code. So I just wrote a color code down in a paper there. So I'm going to give it F330. So then for this one, I'm going to give it another color code. So the color code for this one is going to be BC544B. So that is the color code for that one. And so that's going to be the color code for them. And this one is kind of, I think, orange. So this kind of orange, and as well the orange in tkinter is kind of not looking very good. So I just gave it a color code there. And this one is red, and the red in tkinter is very dark. I don't know why. So I just gave it a color code which is kind of like red or light red. So after that, I'm now going to change all the positions for that. So all of them, the x are going to be the same. I'm just going to be changing the y values. So that it's just like going down, down, down. So, and this one, I think I should just give it like 585. Let me just give this one like 625. So this one be a bit down. 625. And now let's go ahead and run that. Okay, it's still running. So let me run that again, and let's see how it's going to look like. No, did we run into any issues? Okay, so as you can see, this is how it looks like now. So we have our colors here. Like that. Sorry. So here we have our colors here. We have our row, our entries, our labels, and here we have our create button, our update, and our delete. So you can see that these are not working right now. There are buttons there, you can see as I'm clicking them, but they don't have any functionality right now. So now to add some functionalities to them, for them to have some things to do, we're now going to go ahead in creating our function. So the first function I'm going to create is going to be the add one. So I think I should just close that for now. So let me close out there. So let me just remove some space there. So now I'm going to create the functions. So the first one I'm going to create is going to be add one. So here I'm going to do define add one. In cap lock, define add one. So this add one here, I'm going to do first. It's going to take a parameter of first, last, and last. Okay, and the number as a phone number there. So this is what it's going to take there. And here I'm basically just going to do global retrieve. So remember that global is used for accessing variables outside a function. So I can now make changes to all these variables, like to the retrieve, right? Where did I define retrieve? Okay, so you can make changes to the retrieve variables inside a function there. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to say main dot add one. So remember that I told you guys that I'm still going to use all these functions here that we created here. This is our main.py. So I'm going to use this add one. So you can see that this add one takes parameter of first, last, and number. So I'm going to take the first, last, and number like that. So I'm going to call the function main add one, and I'm still going to pass in the parameters first, last, comma email. So that, why am I always writing email? I don't know why. A number there. So those are going to be the parameters it's going to take. And after that, what I want to do is okay, let me just go ahead, create another function. I'll come back to what I wanted to say. because it won't make sense if I say right now. So now let me do define update one. Let me just do define update. I don't know why I'm saying update one. So I'm going to define update, and update is going to take a parameter of ID first, last, and as well the number. So these are going to be the parameters it's going to take. And now I'm going to do global tree because I want to access this tree here. So I know that I'm not using the tree here, so that's why I said I'll go back to what I wanted to say, because if I explain it now, it won't make much sense. Because now we're going to do main. I'm going to access the updates in our main file. So main.update. So if we go here to our updates takes the parameter. Where is update here? So update take a parameter of ID, first, last, and number. So here I'm going to do main.update, and what I want to pass to update is basically the ID, the first, the last, and as well the number. So those are the parameters we want to pass in there, and that is that for this one. And now let's do the define delete, which is basically going to delete. And now this delete is basically just going to take ID. Remember, it's going to take an ID. We'll go here. Where is delete? Okay, so this is delete line 40. You can see that it only takes delete. It only takes ID as the parameter. So I'm going to pass in ID there. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do this global tree again. And I'll show you guys where I am doing this. So global tree there. And global tree now, I'm going to do main.delete. So we're going to use that delete function in our main. And I'm going to pass in ID as a parameter. And that should just be everything for now. And now let's go ahead and assign let's assign the functions to our buttons. So our buttons are still going to be useless now because they don't have anything doing. So now let's just give it some functions or the commands. So I think that this one will be kind of long, but you guys should just try and understand what I'm doing. So for the first one, I'm going to do command should be equal to, and command should be equal to lambda. So just try to understand what I'm doing. So lambda, so the command is going to be lambda, and here I'm going to do add one. So add one. So this lambda add one, I'm basically calling this add one function here. Give some spacing. So I'm calling this add one function here, which is for the add one there. So I'm going to call this add one function, and that's why I say lambda add one. And here I need to pass in some parameters there. So if you go to the add one, here you can see that it takes first, last, and number as the parameters. So for the first one, I'm just basically going to do first entry dot get. So this first entry dot get is going to go ahead and get the text or anything that we input in this our first entry here. Let me just run that there. Okay, so this first entry, this is our first name entry. So whenever we type in anything and we click create, we're going to automatically go and get the text from there. So that is what we're going to want to do for all the remaining ones there. So the first one for the add one, I'm going to get first entry dot get, and we're also going to do last entry dot get. And this is why I said it's going to be kind of long and chunky. And here as well, going to do I think the number entry dot get. So these are the things that we're getting there. So I want to get the text from there, and after that there, yeah. So for the other one, which is basically for the update button, I think it's still going to take the same parameters there. So I'm just going to go ahead and copy everything here, which is basically the first entry, this and this. So I'm going to grab that there and copy that. So now this one is going to take a command. So let me just do that. Command should basically be equal to lambda, and here is the update update. So I'm going to call the update function, and update function is going to take all these ones as the parameters. And if we go to our updates actually takes row ID, I guess. So update takes ID. So let's just do that for the ID first before doing all the other ones. So here I'm gonna do ID. Let's give some space in there. So ID entry dot get. So that's gonna get that there and do that. So that's gonna get the ID there. And for the other one, which is for the delete, I'm just gonna grab this ID get ID entry because that's what we're gonna need. And for this one, I'm gonna do command should be equal to, and for this one, the command should be equal to lambda. Sorry about that. Lambda. So lambda. So here I'm gonna do delete, and for the delete, I'm gonna pass in ID entry dot get. So that's what I'm gonna pass in there as the parameter there. So after that, now let me try running the function and let's see what's gonna happen. So let me go run the function. I said run the function, run the code. And here now, let me add some things here. So I'm going to do first name. So I'm going to say Branson. Okay, let me use another name. Let me say YouTube sub. YouTube sub phone number should just be some random phone numbers there. Let me do create. Now that I've done create, we can't see anything here, right? It's supposed to update, but now let me close that. Let me close the function, the window, and now let me run that, and you see that I believe that okay. So here is not actually showing anything. So that is the issue there. So it has created it, but it's not actually displaying anything now. So that is what I want to do now. So I'm going to create a function which is basically going to show everything here. So I don't know where I should create a function. Where should I even do it? Okay, so I think let me just do it here. So let me do define show. So define show, and show is gonna do, let's say, I think let me just do for I in main show main.show all. So let me just explain what I'm doing. So remember, if we go to our show all here, where did I do that? A show all function. So here in our main show function here, you can see that we have show all, and here we are returning the result, which is basically c.fetch all. And this is basically going to return a list of tuples of all the values there. So now I'm going to do define for I in define show, and here I'm going to do for I in main show dot all. So I want to iterate through that list that is going to return. So remember, see here that is returning results. And results is equal to c.fetch all from this. So it's going to return a list there. So I want to iterate through that list, and I want to say triv dot insert. So I want to insert a values or some values. So I want to insert this, comma end. That's what I want to do. So this means that I want to insert. This is just gonna, you just have to leave it blank there, so it won't add any space or anything. So I want to insert to the end. So here, this here, you have to put in the position. What I want to insert it to the end of the list, or to the end. So like if I actually added 3, that means I want it to add to the 4th one. If I've done 4, I want it to add to the 5th. If I've done 8, I want it to add to 9, and not 8 or like that. So that's what we're just doing, the end. So we want to add it to the end, irrespective of what the value is. So here I'm going to do values. So I want value should be equal to a tuple. Remember, a tuple. And here I'm going to do I should be, so remember that this is our I here. So I, and here I want to get the first element. So I'm going to do 0. So if you notice, this is going to get the first element there. And here I'm going to do I1, which is going to get the second. So this one is the row ID, the first name. Now let's do for the last name. And now let's do for the phone number. So this is for the phone number. So this is how it's going to go ahead and get all these values and insert it into the tree distance. So now let me just remove all the spaces there, because I did that just to make it visible there. So after that, let me just call the show function. And now let's go ahead and run that, and let's see what's going to happen. So you can see that we now have everything that is in our database. You can see that it's looking well. And we have our row ID 1, which is brand text, row ID 2, which is Tegik, YouTube, no, row ID 3, which is YouTube, sub, blah blah blah, which is one that we created, and everything there. Now let me show you guys an issue there. So let me do one which is just gonna be, let's say, I don't even know any name, so let me just do David Martins. The phone number should be 9090 whatever. So let me do create, and if you notice, we're actually clicking the but it's not actually updating. We can't see any thing being added. But now let me close it and let me run that again, and now you can see David Martins. So whenever you are updating something or deleting or creating something, you actually want to see the response in lifetime. You want to see that, okay, it has added this, it has deleted this, but we can't see now. It won't be cool that we have to run it and close the program, run it again, and that would just be like stress, and we don't want to have that issue there. So how we can fix that is that we have to try and refresh the page frequently. So that is why I imported that triv, this thing there. So let's say let me just go back to this place here, to the create, to the add one here. So in this function add one, that's why I did import, that's why I did global triv. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to say triv, so triv dot delete. So triv dot delete, and what I want to delete is I want to delete every triv. Let me just explain this. So I want to delete triv dot get children. So I want to delete all the lists there. So let me just run that there to show you guys what I'm talking about. So you can see that everything here are the children. This is the children. All these are 1 2 3 4, 1 2 3 4. All everything here, everyone is a child. So what I want to do is I did a step because I want to delete all the children. So if I delete all the children, that means that it's not going to be empty. I'm not actually deleting from the database, but I'm deleting just from that display. So when I delete it now, I now want to call the show function, which is automatically going to show everything there for us. So it's now going to like kind of like update it for us. So that is what we want. And wait. So okay, I don't even think we need to import use global. I think we can actually just implement this into our function. I think that is just the best way. So let me just add that there. So here I'm gonna do global triv. I think that should work perfectly fine. Let me just remove all this global triv, and I don't know if that's gonna work, but I believe it should work. So let me just do show in all of them. So let me call show here. Let me remove all these spaces here. So now let's try running the code again, and I hope that everything worked well for us. Okay, so here we have delete must be an iterable where. So at line 92, okay, triv dot delete asterisk gets children. Okay, so I think that we're actually having an issue there. Well, let me just do try. I think that I should fix that. If that doesn't work, I'm gonna go with that, with the normal way I did it before. We're just going to do except pass. So let me run that again and let's see. So you can see this is how it works. And now let me try adding a new record, which I'm just going to do something random and some numbers. Let me do create. Okay, so we have an issue here. So we say delete argument after asterisk must be an iterable. I guess okay, I think okay. So this was supposed to be a function that I just noticed there. So here in our add one, define add one, you can see that we're actually deleting again. So I think I should just remove that there. And now let's try running. Let's see. So you can see that I just created multiple things while I was testing it. So in the first name, let's add some like hello or whatever. And in the phone number, let me just add some random numbers. And let's click create. And here you can see that it automatically added that for us here. So we are now having all these things here and everything is working well for us. So now for the first thing, let me add another. Okay, let me start deleting them. No, I think I should just clear this so that we won't get confused. Let me delete row ID 10 and I hope it's gonna work. Okay, everything's working fine. So let me delete row ID 9, delete. Let me delete 8. It's deleting. Let me delete 7. It's deleting. Let me delete 6. Let me see if 6 is gonna work. Yeah, so everything is working well. So for this one, I want to update row ID 5. I don't want to delete it. So for the first name, I want to change it to Daniel. So here I'm gonna put Daniel Daniel David on the phone. Let me just leave it like that. So I'm gonna click update, and as you can see, it changed Daniel David now. So everything is working well, and I believe that you guys understand how it all works. So if I click create now, it's basically not going to let me just do this. So it's not going to add anything, remember, because we created our condition here in our main.py that when you add one, you should check if the name is equal to this and not to repeat anything. So you can see that our code is, I think our code is working 100% well. Yeah, so I hope that you guys get the idea on how we can do this. So let me delete row ID 5. See that everything is working well. Row ID 4. Yeah, so I've been able to create this basic contact management system with Python, and I hope that you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, please smash the like button, share to your friends and family, and I'm very sorry for the issues or some mistakes that we're having. So remember that I had some issues while I was doing this delete here, so I spent some time doing correcting the mistakes there. But I'm very sorry, guys. I was just trying to show you guys how we can just, I was finding a better way to do that. But I hope that you guys enjoyed the video. So if you did, please smash the like button, share to your friends and family. Please share the video a lot, please. I want to grow my channel. And please subscribe. And if you have any feedback, any suggestion, please leave it down in the comment section. And if you want, if you want me to create a video on SQLite, like teaching SQLite3 from basics in Python, please leave it down in the comment section, and if I see any comment like that, I'll create a video on that. And I hope that you guys enjoy the video. So that will be it for this video, guys, and I'll see you in the next video.